All right, so we're going deep today. Nonverbal communication. All those fascinating little signals, the ones that scream what someone's really thinking, even when their words say otherwise.
Yeah, think of it like, X-ray vision for human behavior, really.
Yeah.
Once you get the hang of it, you'll be picking up on things you never noticed before.
And we're focusing on the work of Joe Navarro. You've given us a mountain of his stuff to go through, so buckle up.
He's the guy, yeah.
So let's start with the basics. Navarro emphasizes the limbic system when it comes to nonverbal cues. For our listeners who might not know, that's the part of the brain dealing with emotions, instincts, that kind of thing. Why is that so important?
Well, because, you see, the limbic system, it can't really lie. It reacts to everything around us, but honestly, think about it. You know when you're nervous, say in a meeting or something,
Oh, yeah.
you start fidgeting, maybe touching your face, shifting in your seat.
Totally.
That's your limbic system trying to, calm you down.
Yeah.
And it's all happening right out in the open for everyone to see.
So even if someone's giving you a perfectly rehearsed speech, their body might be telling a whole different story.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. Navarro starts his analysis at the bottom with the feet.
The feet. Seriously. I thought it was all about, happy feet and all that.
Well, there's that. Sure, happy feet, they're definitely a thing. But it's a lot more subtle than that. Like even the direction our feet are pointing can give away what we're thinking, our intentions. Let's say you're talking to someone and suddenly their feet are aimed towards the door.
Oh, I do that.
Right. It's like their limbic system's already planning their escape route.
It's so true. I've definitely caught myself doing that when I'm ready to leave a conversation. My feet just seem to have a mind of their own.
They do. And how we move our feet, too, tells a lot about how we're feeling. Happy feet, those that are like lifting and wiggling. That usually means someone's feeling good, genuinely engaged, enjoying themselves. But then you get the feet that are like glued to the floor or tucked away under a chair. That could be a sign of discomfort, maybe some anxiety there.
So next time I'm pitching an idea, I should be looking at everyone's feet, not just their faces.
You got it.
Could be more telling. But what about legs? I mean, everyone always talks about crossed legs, but I feel like that could mean so many things.
Yeah, crossed legs, that one's a bit tricky. Depends. When it's relaxed,
Yeah.
like around people you trust, that usually means comfort. But if someone's crossing their legs really tight or using them to like block themselves off, that could be a sign of discomfort, maybe feeling a bit threatened.
Right, creating that little barrier. It's funny, when I feel insecure in a meeting, I catch myself crossing my legs and arms, almost like I'm trying to, I don't know, disappear or something.
It's self-protection, totally natural. But have you ever noticed how people walk together? Like couples, I've heard if they're in sync, it means they're happier.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
It's interesting, isn't it, how our movements, when they sync up with someone else's, can show, well, the harmony or disharmony, I guess, in a relationship. People who are in sync, they tend to, feel good together, connected. Speaking of being in sync, let's talk hips. You know how some people, they just have this presence, this way of commanding attention when they walk into a room?
Oh, absolutely. Like they own the place. Yeah.
Part of that is how they use their hips. It's all about power and territory, really. Think about that classic pose, arms akimbo, hands on hips, elbows out, legs apart a bit. It's like a power move, showing dominance, claiming space.
Yeah, I've seen plenty of bosses do that, especially when they're not happy about something.
Exactly. Then there's what Navarro calls genital framing. It's more subtle. Usually guys do it. Tuck their thumbs into their belt or pockets so their hands are kind of framing that area.
So it's more about projecting confidence, maybe even flirting a little.
Could be, yeah. Hips can say a lot, depending on the situation. Moving on up, the torso. Navarro calls it a human billboard. What do you think he means by that?
I guess it's all about how we, how our clothes, our posture, even how we breathe can show off our social status, how confident we are, our emotions.
Exactly. And remember that instinct we have to protect our vulnerable front. Like when we feel threatened, we cross our arms, hold a bag in front of us, even a drink, anything to create that barrier.
Makes sense.
But then when we feel comfortable with someone, we turn towards them, giving them access to that heart space.
It's amazing how much our bodies can reveal,
Right.
even when we don't realize it.
It really is. Now let's talk about the neck and shoulders. The neck, it's like a stress hot spot. When we're stressed, we touch it, massage it, fiddle with our collars, all to soothe those nerves.
Right. And haven't you noticed, women especially, they often cover that little dip at the base of the neck, the suprasternal notch, when they feel threatened. It's like a shield almost.
It is. It's fascinating how our bodies just react to stress, even when we try to hide it. And our shoulders, too. Slumped forward, that can signal insecurity, while squared shoulders, that's confidence.
It's like our bodies are constantly sending out these signals, whether we want them to or not. What about our arms? I mean, they're pretty expressive too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Arms are fascinating. They can be welcoming or warning, protecting or trying to pacify. Open arms, palms out, that's universal for come closer, I'm approachable. Like when parents greet their kids with open arms. Pure limbic love.
And the opposite, hands behind the back. That's a clear stay away signal. Even dogs get that one.
It's true. It goes beyond culture, these gestures. They're deep in our evolution.
So even if you're in a foreign country, don't speak the language, you can still communicate with those basic nonverbal cues. Pretty cool. But what about those, smaller arm movements we do when we're talking? Do those mean anything too?
Oh, definitely. The way we move our arms, it emphasizes what we're saying,
No.
shows our emotions, even our thought process. Someone who uses, like, big, sweeping gestures, they might be more expressive, outgoing, while someone who keeps their arms close might be more reserved, introverted.
Interesting. All right, let's get to the hands. Navarro calls them, what was it, marvels of expression, right?
He does, and he's right. I mean, human hands, they can do so much, make so many gestures. Think about touch. Just a handshake can tell you a lot about how someone feels.
Oh, yeah, I hate getting those awkward fingertip handshakes. It's like they're trying to avoid touching you. Definitely not a good sign.
Right. Full palm touch, that shows warmth, connection. Fingertips that can signal distance, hesitation. But let's talk about some specific hand gestures Navarro talks about. We mentioned steepling, but what about interlaced fingers?
I've always thought that was a sign of stress, anxiety.
Not always, no. Interlaced fingers, they can actually be a sign of comfort, especially when the thumbs are pointing up. It's like a self-soothing thing, very subtle. But if the thumbs are down, that can mean discomfort, maybe a lack of confidence.
Wow, so even the direction of the thumbs matters. This is fascinating. Okay, moving on to the face. I mean, that's got to be the most expressive part of all, right?
The face. Oh, absolutely. We'll start with the forehead. That's a good indicator of stress and anxiety.
I always thought wrinkles were just, from getting older, but now I'm realizing they could be telling me something completely different.
They can. Wrinkles, furrows, even sweating. All signs that someone is feeling tense, uncomfortable. Even the tiniest bit of tension in the forehead can give away what's going on inside. Next up, the eyes. They're called the windows to the soul for a reason. They can show so many emotions, from joy to fear, sadness, everything.
And they show how engaged we are, how interested.
Absolutely. Like pupil dilation. That's a classic sign of attraction, interest. Of course, it could be other things too, like changes in lighting, but in the right context, it can be very telling.
Interesting. So if someone's pupils widen when they see me, maybe that means they like what they see.
Maybe, yeah. Now, what about eye contact?
Well, I know it's important to maintain eye contact, but staring can be creepy.
That's it. There's a balance. Good eye contact shows interest, respect. Avoiding eye contact, that can be a sign of discomfort, disinterest, maybe even deception. But it's complicated. Varies by culture, too.
True. What about that eyebrow flash thing?
Ah, yes. The eyebrow flash. It's universal, a way of recognizing someone, greeting them. It's subtle but powerful, just acknowledging someone's there, showing you're open to interacting.
It's amazing how such a small gesture can mean so much. What about the mouth? I mean, obviously, smiles are important, but there's a lot more going on there, right?
Oh, definitely. The mouth can communicate so much, from happiness and excitement to sadness, anger, disgust, you name it.
And you can always tell a fake smile from a genuine one.
Absolutely. A real smile, what we call a Duchenne smile, it involves the whole face, not just the mouth. Corners of the mouth go up, and those muscles around the eyes, they crinkle, making crow's feet. A fake smile, it's all in the mouth.
So it's the eyes that make the smile real. What about those other mouth behaviors, like biting the lip, licking, pursing? What do those mean?
A lot of times, those are pacifying behaviors, ways we try to calm ourselves down when we're stressed, anxious, unsure. And when the lips just disappear altogether, tucked in, that's a big sign someone's uncomfortable, feeling the pressure.
It's like they're holding back their emotions.
Exactly. The mouth, it's delicate, but it can reveal a lot about our inner state.
Okay, moving down to the chin. What can we learn from that? Often overlooked part of the face.
The chin. More than you'd think. Touching it, stroking it, that usually means thoughtfulness, contemplation, maybe skepticism. But if someone's jutting their chin forward, that can be aggressive, defiant.
Like they're saying, don't mess with me.
Exactly. The chin, even though it's small, It can communicate a lot about our attitude, our intentions. Wow, we've covered a lot today, from the feet all the way up to the face. You
Uh-oh.
have. It's amazing the language of nonverbal communication, all the secrets our bodies reveal.
But how do we put it all together? I mean, how do we know when someone's being deceptive or genuinely distressed? Those are two very different things, right?
That's the big question, isn't it? And the key is there's no single behavior that's a surefire lie detector. It's about spotting those clusters of discomfort cues and seeing if what someone's saying matches up with what their body's doing.
So, like if someone says they're fine, but their face is tense, their lips are disappearing, and their feet are pointed toward the exit, that's a pretty good sign something's not right.
Exactly. Those are red flags for sure.
But, I mean, honest people get stressed too. They might show those same behaviors. How do we tell the difference?
Well, context, that's the key. Yeah. You got to look at the whole situation, the person's usual behavior, their baseline, and all the other stuff that's going on. Like someone who doesn't make a lot of eye contact, maybe they're just shy, not trying to deceive anyone.
So it's about the big picture, not just one little thing.
Right. And if you're not sure, you can always ask, clarify things, get more info. We're not trying to be mind readers here, just good observers.
Right, not Sherlock Holmes or anything. But paying attention to all these cues, it can really help us understand people better.
Absolutely. And that's helpful in, well, pretty much every part of life, personal and professional.
Speaking of professional, I've always wondered about those, high stakes negotiations you see in movies, one person trying to bluff the other. Do those nonverbal cues really matter in real life negotiations?
Oh, they matter big time. In fact, good negotiators, they're masters at reading and using nonverbal communication. It's like their secret weapon.
I bet that's where spotting those clusters of discomfort cues comes in handy.
You got it. If you can see those little signs that someone's feeling uncomfortable, stressed, you can use that to your advantage.
So, say I'm negotiating a deal, and I notice the other person starts fidgeting, touching their face, or their eye contact drops when I mention a certain point. That could mean they're not happy with that part of the deal.
Exactly. And that gives you leverage, to maybe push for a better outcome for yourself.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. I never thought of it that way. So it's not just about spotting lies, it's about understanding how the whole interaction's going, even the unspoken stuff.
Exactly. It's like tuning into this whole other language
Yeah.
that's constantly flowing between people, even when they're not saying a word.
And that applies to everything. Job interviews, first dates, family gatherings, you name it.
Absolutely. The principles are the same. It's all about observing, interpreting, and then responding to those nonverbal cues.
Okay, so we've talked about reading other people, but what about ourselves? Is there anything we can do to make sure we're sending the right signals?
That's a great question. And the answer is yes, definitely. The first step is awareness. Start paying attention to what your own body's doing.
So, like, if I'm constantly fidgeting during a presentation, people might think I'm nervous or unprepared, even if I'm not.
Exactly. And once you know your own habits, you can start changing them. Like if you want to project confidence, stand tall, shoulders back, head up, make eye contact, use open gestures, that kind of thing.
It's funny, I've noticed when I stand up straight and make eye contact, I do feel more confident.
It's not just how you feel, it's how others perceive you, People are always reading your nonverbal cues, even if they don't realize it.
So, if I want to make a good impression, I got to be mindful of my body language.
Absolutely. And the good news is it's a skill. You can practice and get better at it.
That's encouraging. So, it's not just about being born charismatic, it's about learning how to use these skills.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
All right, so we've talked about reading others, becoming aware of ourselves. Is there anything else our listeners should keep in mind?
One big thing is to remember, nonverbal communication, it always depends on the context.
So something that's rude in one culture might be perfectly normal in another.
Exactly. You got to be sensitive to those differences and not judge too quickly based on just nonverbal cues.
That's a really good point. We don't want to misunderstand someone just because we don't know their cultural norms.
Right. And another thing, nonverbal communication, it's a two-way street. It's not just about what you're sending out. It's about being open to what you're receiving from others.
So listening with our eyes as well as our ears.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful, so fascinating. It lets us connect on a deeper level, understand those unspoken messages.
It's like we've been given this secret decoder ring for human behavior.
And the more we use it, the more fluent we become in this whole nonverbal language.
This has been amazing, so insightful, this whole deep dive into nonverbal communication. I feel like I have all these new tools now for my interactions.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, just keep practicing, keep observing. The more you pay attention, the more you'll learn about yourself and the people around you.
I think you're absolutely right. Now, before we wrap up, anything else you want to leave our listeners with? Any final thoughts, recommendations?
Just this. Don't underestimate the power of nonverbal communication. It can help you build better relationships, achieve your goals, navigate all the complexities of human interaction. So pay attention, be observant, keep learning. You'll be amazed at what you discover.
That's great advice, and I think it's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been a truly fascinating conversation.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into nonverbal communication. We hope you've learned some valuable insights that you can use in your own lives. Until next time, keep those eyes peeled and those brains engaged. This is The Deep Dive, signing off.
Yeah, it's easy to, jump to conclusions based on just one thing. But when you step back, consider the context, you get a much better understanding of, well, what's really going on?
It's like we have to have some empathy, right? The more we understand about people, about why they do the things they do, the more compassionate we can be to ourselves and to everyone else.
That's it. It's not just about, like, cracking a code or something. It's about using what we learn to build better connections with people, more meaningful ones.
I like that. So nonverbal communication, it's not like a one-size-fits-all thing, right? What works in one situation might not work in another.
Right. We have to adapt, adjust our approach depending on, who we're with, what's happening.
Makes sense. That's where experience comes in, I guess. The more we interact with people, the better we get at reading these cues and using them too.
Exactly.
It's funny, I'm already starting to notice things I never did before, like how people shift their feet when they're about to leave, or that little furrow in the brow when someone's not so sure about something.
That's great. It's amazing how much we miss until we start paying attention.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening, really. I feel like I've gained a whole new level of, well, awareness
Yeah,
of myself and of everyone around me.
that's fantastic. And remember, this journey of understanding nonverbal communication, it never really ends. There's always more to learn, more to discover.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to keep going with this. Any last bits of advice for our listeners about how to, keep learning?
I'd say start with yourself. Pay attention to what your own body's doing, how it affects your interactions. Then look outward. Observe the people you're with, their gestures, their expressions, their posture. And don't be afraid to ask questions, Look for more information.
Great advice. So it's all about being curious, being open to learning more.
Exactly. And the more you learn, the more you'll appreciate how complex, how amazing human interaction really is.
This has been a fascinating deep dive, truly. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this has, sparked your curiosity, made you want to pay more attention to all those unspoken signals around us. Until next time, keep those eyes peeled and those brains engaged. This is The Deep Dive, signing off.